Hello? This is the Butler Police Department. Can I help you? Yes, sir. My wife left here about 2 hours ago.
Everyone was looking for Micah. Where was Micah?
Where would someone have come by and tried to abduct her?
You add all the things together and something's not right.
It was clear that they knew about guns.
I cannot kill you if you don't tell me the truth. Now spit it out.
He's telling me, I'm sorry, I don't know where she is.
Did something happen to Micah last night? Where's Micah?
And she kept repeating, he's going to kill me.
And he shoots my daughter.
And that's where he cut him out.
That's about the only time in my career that I just wanted to shoot him.
Here we go. Here comes the cop.
Once you've taken someone, you either kill them or you get caught.
You can run, can't hide. Micah as a child was the typical little sister. She had a very outgoing personality. She had that tomboy kind of a spirit. We loved sports and we liked being outdoors. She loved running. Micah had a way of drawing people in and making them feel appreciated and making them feel loved and encouraged. Micah had a very strong faith.
We are a Christian family. For Casey and Micah growing up, we wanted to be authentic and actually live our faith.
She had such a sweet, tender heart. I love that about her. And she was a peacemaker and was real sweet about how she kind of conducted herself socially. Micah wanted to be a nurse and got a job as a nurse's aide. You don't take on that profession without having a heart for the vulnerable and for the broken and the hurting.
Micah was an employee of mine. She was the loveliest soul. She was the nurse that you wanted on your side, the one that you wanted to be there to help you with a patient.
She was just a kind-hearted young lady.
Thursday night, which was the 30th, Micah worked late nights. It was kind of a dreary, rainy night. I remember leaving that office and she was there with patients. I was probably one of the last two people to see Micah alive.
We got a call that night, I think it was around 10:30. Micah's husband, Thomas, said, hey, do you know where Micah is? She's gone out for a run, she hadn't come back, didn't know if you'd heard from her or not.
It was not uncommon for her to go running.
On the final call, it was, okay, Thomas, you need to be calling the police and start a search, and we're coming to Memphis to help in that search.
Hello? This is the Butler Police Department. Can I help you? Sir, my wife left here about 2 hours ago. She left at like 8:30. Either go for a walk or run. It may be nothing, but like if she sprained her ankle and she's sitting on the side of the road or something, you know what I mean?
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Thomas Tate.
All right, we'll have to get out there short.
We packed our stuff and headed to Memphis immediately. It's about a 2-hour drive.
Everyone was looking for Micah. Where was Micah? So there's this big search, this big hunt for Micah the evening of the 30th. Where could Micah be? Where's Micah? The dog was there, she wasn't there.
Well, I drive to her house, and at her house, there's yellow tape everywhere. There's police cars everywhere. and it starts to make me even more alarmed. I mean, it is a scary situation.
As soon as we got there, Thomas said, well, she's going out for a run, so I started running. The routes that I knew that we had been on, different routes that we had run from her house around Bartlett. She was running without her phone and without her dog, and that would have been unusual for her to go out without either one of those. There were severe storm warnings with lightning and severe rain at that time.
It was uncommon for her to go running late at night, in the dark, in a rainstorm.
I'm looking at culverts where she might have tripped. She have fallen in off the side of a road, off the side of a sidewalk. Where would someone have come by and tried to abduct her? What are some places where that could have taken place? I'm just looking for any kind of sign about what's going on.
There was very little sleep had by anybody. Everyone's doing all they can to try and find Micah.
I was like, I've got to go find her. You know, what do you need me for? What can I do? We went and got four-wheelers, side-by-sides, and we went to the Loosahatchee Bottoms to look for her. So the Loosahatchee is the river, but we call it the bottoms, where you actually drive down to. And we went through all the crevices, the ditches. We did that for a few hours and came up with nothing. We were standing at every crossroad in Bartlett near her home handing out flyers, thousands and thousands of flyers, and all of us searching.
Lieutenant Halford came to the house about 7 o'clock, and that's when the investigation became much more intense because he took charge of the situation.
I get to the police station and I walk in, and the first person I see when I walk in is Thomas, and Thomas is across the lobby, and I walk in and we meet in the middle of the lobby and we hug. And I'm crying and he's crying, and I'm like, we're gonna find her, it's gonna be okay. He's telling me, I'm sorry, I don't know where she is. I'm sorry, I don't know where she is.
One of my first questions for Lieutenant Halford was, why are you taking Thomas to this other place? And he goes, well, typically in these situations, the first person we have to eliminate is the spouse. And so we're gonna question him separately from the family. So that's when it began to sink in that we've got a problem.
There was one time that I asked Thomas, you know, it just occurred to me, I wonder if they've had a fight. And I didn't get in his face or scream at him or anything else. I just said, you know, did y'all have a fight? Or did you have a disagreement and maybe she's just left and spent the night with a friend or something? He said no, they hadn't had a disagreement, nothing had happened.
When Thomas reported Micah missing, he said that she was out jogging. Well, a thunderstorm was in the area that evening. Heavy rain, heavy thunder. Most people don't go jogging that, even if they're training for a marathon. As we were looking through the house, Micah's purse is still at the house. Micah's phone is still at the house. Her ID is still at the house. I mean, even when you go jogging, you go to the gym, you take your phone with you. As I was speaking to Thomas, basic information, you know, how tall is Micah? How much does she weigh? What color hair does she have? He would just randomly break down crying. Very emotional throughout the whole thing. As I walked around the house, instead of Thomas sitting or talking to anybody or talking to the officer, he actually followed me throughout the house, made small talk with me while I was looking at different things, explaining things that, you know, didn't need explanation. Just very, very uneasy, very nervous that we were there.
It was around noon that the police separated our families, I felt like they knew something was happening, and that's when our conversation started to move to, I think Thomas knows something, where she's at, or... So as that progressed, we became more and more concerned. Does he know something about it?
Anytime we would ask him a question that was the least bit pointed, that would maybe position him to give us an answer he didn't want to give us, he'd start dry heaving. You add all the things together and something's not right.
Out of high school, my sister decided to go to Harding University, which is our hometown university. My sister really wanted to pursue nursing, and that goes to her heart of trying to help people and love people and help people through hard situations. And so because Harding had a good nursing school, she wanted to be involved with that.
Micah and Thomas met through a friend group. There was a crew of them hanging out together, and he happened to be friends of hers.
He's athletic, and so it matched up with my sister wanting to play basketball and be involved in those things. They liked to be outdoors, they liked sports, and so I could see how they could match up.
They were from two very different worlds. She led a rather sheltered life. It was a small town in Arkansas, predominantly very Christian. There's like no alcohol sold in that county. His parents lived outside of Atlanta, Georgia, a much more metropolitan, open, exposed to just about everything. He was a much more worldly person than Micah was.
We really didn't meet him in person until he came to our home Bible study. So then it was just a matter of trying to get to know him and seeing what he was like. And first impression was, he's okay. Wasn't over the top impressed, but didn't have any big red flags to start with either.
The more I learned about him, he was more of an introvert. He did not like to be around a lot of people, and so that was a little bit opposite of Micah's personality. And so I was a little curious why he was her choice and why they were dating.
We found out pretty quickly that much of what he was about was not like Micah. And we could not identify exactly what it was and name what it was, but it just did not seem to be a good fit.
As you learn more about him, I was like, I'm not sure about this relationship.
As we were learning to get acquainted with Thomas, we found out different things that he had in his background that were concerning to us. Part of that had to do with a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, some promiscuity, even dabbling some in some drugs.
And then she would try to justify and explain away some of the flags that we would point out.
By the time they had dated for nearly a year, we were starting to really get concerned. She was very bubbly and friendly and very outgoing to everybody. And then all of a sudden, she was very withdrawn. She was stressed. I believe Micah went into the relationship open, wholehearted, honest, transparent, and vulnerable. And then this very shining, bright light in our lives, the light just kind of went out. He would discourage her from being part of social things and part of even family things. The things that we saw in her relationship were very typical observations that you would see in someone who is trying to manipulate another person, trying to instill some power and control over that person in such a way that they almost answer to them. And that was what we were having trouble with.
I remember very clearly there was this moment where my sister called me, and she called me and said, "Mom and Dad don't want this relationship to continue. I'm drawn to him. What's your advice? What's your big brother advice to me?" And I remember being extremely torn. And what I share with her is like, I trust Mom and Dad, and I love Mom and Dad, but you need to make the best choice for Micah.
It was about 2 years from the time they started dating till the time they got married. Just the week prior to her wedding, I mentioned a young man that she was had a very sweet relationship with, and it probably could have gone romantic, but it just never did. And I said that I spoke with him recently, and I told him that it was, it's coming up a few days before your wedding, and he made the statement, "I'm sorry I didn't pursue that any further." And she perked up and said, "He said that?" And I just thought that was interesting because just days before her wedding, that showed me that she still had some doubts about what she was doing.
Before I walked her down the aisle, I said, "Micah, it's still not too late. If you want to back out of this, I'll support you 100%. I want what's best for you." And she just said, "No, let's go with it. Let's take me down the aisle. Let's do this."
After that, she had received a nursing job with a clinic in Memphis. They moved to Bartlett, which is just on the outskirts of Memphis.
One of the choices that Micah made in order to help their family and to spend more time together was she moved from working in a hospital where they have more of a hectic schedule to move to the Moga Clinic.
She was the nurse that everybody wanted to be. Patients loved Micah. She just was energetic and just had this honesty about her. And our patients just really adored Micah, along with her co-workers.
What happened after they got married then is we wanted to be their cheerleader. We tried to affirm and to do everything we could to help to give our blessing onto this home that they were building. I believe because she knew that we were working hard to build that relationship, then she was unwilling to share anything about her struggles that had been taking place in their marriage.
All of us that worked with Micah just based on interactions with Thomas, kind of questioned him and kind of thought he was a little shady, disrespectful, and she was such a loving, kind-hearted person. He just belittled her, and I think that his drinking didn't help that, because it would be in those spells that he would drink and things would come out of his mouth that it shouldn't. We all learned that there was some marital counseling going on.
She loved helping people, and that ultimately was what fed into her marriage too. She loved Thomas, and she wanted to help that relationship.
The thing that I noticed the most was the anger. Thomas had a hunting dog, and he told the hunting dog to stay in the back of the truck. And then the dog got off the truck and walked towards Thomas. Thomas screams at the dog, "I told you to stay on that truck." And he picked the dog up by the ears and threw it back in the truck. extreme anger, extreme violence. But then 2 or 3 minutes later, he goes back to the truck and is petting on the dog and telling the dog how sweet it is. And so these extreme moods in anger and behavior. But when I point out the red flags, because she was invested in this relationship, she wasn't willing to listen to Dad's advice at this point. Whatever I would say really wasn't taken to heart, because at this point, Thomas had her heart.
He would push to get his way, to get control, to, you know, he would make her probably feel better if they stayed at home alone. You know, he'd give her some compliments. Or if they went out, he'd probably say, you know, oh, why aren't you dressing like that person? Or why do you have to be so picky about your food? You know, things that would make her feel bad about herself.
We don't know that he ever hit Micah physically, but the yelling and the screaming we know was there. And so there would be this argument and belittling. You're so stupid. Why can't you get this right? And then at the other extreme of saying, oh, you're so sweet. I love you so much.
It wasn't like bruises and cuts and scratches and broken bones and cigarette burns. It wasn't that kind of domestic violence. It was the kind of scars in her heart and her spirit dampened and all those things that made her who she was. Many of those were taken away.
And she became a little suspicious, I think, of Thomas. Like when she came home and he was on the phone with some other person, evidently in a very personal way. At that point, I think it became clear to her that he was having an affair. There was no sight of Micah. And of course, 75 to 90% of the time that someone ends up dead, the spouse ends up as a suspect at some point. Then we have a search warrant, and the police gather things from within the house. That's where they find hunting rifles. And it was clear that Thomas and Micah both knew about guns. Thomas went hunting regularly. He had all sorts of hunting rifles and he had handguns. He went hunting all the time with his friends.
The police uncover a lot of different things, from multiple bottles of alcohol to a history of pornography, to him reaching out to another lady.
The officers tracked back through his phone records, and there were many texts with another woman who was from New Jersey. And then they got into the credit cards, and that's when they discovered that there were charges made at Tunica, Mississippi. He used the credit card to play on the slot machines and to pay for the hotel room that he and this woman from New Jersey spent the night in. Micah went home one day and surprised Thomas. He did work from computers and on the phone doing medical sales. He said he was sick, so he wasn't going to be working any. So she thought she would go home and fix him some soup during the middle of the day. And when she got there, he was on the phone with somebody that he seemed to be talking rather intimately to. And this was very alarming to Micah. According to her coworkers, she came back to work and sort of broke down, crying.
I remember Micah being totally distraught to the point of where I went and got her stuff and helped her out the door, and she went home.
He actually had met this woman from New Jersey on a flight to Atlanta, and he was indeed in communication with her and had met her for a weekend down at the casinos in Tunica, Mississippi. So he indeed wasn't very happy with Micah, and he was going after a much more worldly woman.
All of these things were news to our family, and so it's sort of shocking seeing all of these things.
All through that search afternoon, more and more doubts began to arise about what's going on here. We're not getting the whole story. There's things here that don't add up.
And they start going through more personal items, and it turned out that Micah kept a journal. The journal was very revealing.
There was one entry in her prayer journal in February before this happened in April, and she had a whole paragraph that spoke to Thomas's indiscretions and unfaithfulness.
My heart is broken. I am so angry, sad, mad, disappointed at Thomas. If he truly loved me, how would this happen? My mind cannot fathom what he's done. Am I so naive that I didn't see this coming?
It clearly showed the dissolution of a marriage, and this was a sacrilege that was held very sacred by Micah, who's a very religious person.
All I want to do is cry and sleep and forget this relationship ever happened. I've worked so hard on our marriage. I never thought I would be talking to you about unfaithfulness.
She's miserable and losing touch with herself, and only feels comfortable being herself when she is in this journal speaking with God. And, you know, her ask for help, her ask for guidance is just very heart-wrenching. It's tragic and it's sad.
Micah's prayer journal ties it all together, of her talking about her rocky marriage, the things that she's going through. It was very shocking and very painful.
Thomas ends up in an interview room at the Bartlett Police Department, and he's not telling the Bartlett police anything except for her leaving. She's gone jogging. He doesn't know where she is.
Thomas lied to the police. You know, he failed a polygraph test. The agent told us that he did not feel, based on Thomas's results, that Thomas was being 100% truthful.
And when Thomas's father came to town, I think that's sort of when things changed.
Son, look at me. You have failed a polygraph. If you have any idea what happened to your wife, where Micah is right now, for God's sake, don't tell me more lies. Did you spend each weekend turning over the girl? Yeah. Son, I cannot help you if you don't tell me the truth. If you won't tell me the truth, you know I'll go to hell and back to help you, but I cannot help you if you don't tell me the truth. Now spit it out. Now, you have admitted to having an affair. And you told me today that you didn't do that. Why in God's name should I believe you now? Why? Why? Give me one reason. Because you're my son? Thomas, look at me. Where's Micah?
He went from being very aggressive and telling Thomas, you know, don't lie to me, tell me if you hurt, you know, tell me where Micah is. He went from that, within a matter of minutes to it'll be okay.
Thomas, did something happen to Michael last night? Just not head, yes, sir. Did something happen to Michael last night, son? Thomas. Yes or no? Okay, that's it. Right, that's it. Is that right? Okay. Thomas. Thomas, look at me, look at me. Look, we come as far as go this way. But you know, you will feel better when it's over with.
We had people around us praying, saying, God, reveal something. Make something happen.
Did you shoot Mike? Did you shoot? Where's she at? Oh, and she got the water hole, son. What she did. Where is she, son? Where is she, son? She's on the roof of the
That night, the police pulled me and my mom and my dad into the side room, and they share with us that Micah was shot by Thomas, and that he had left her body at the Loosahatchee River, and that he was taking them to her body at that time.
He shoots my daughter, and he leaves her out there for over 24 hours. Wild animals, elements, it didn't matter.
He takes the police to her body.
I personally walked out to where they found her, and it is way off the road, in the middle of thorns, brambles, mud, leaves, everything. There was a very off the beaten path place to leave her. And it looked as if he had probably carried her there, probably with the intention of throwing her in the Loosahatchee River. But he couldn't make it quite to the river, so he left her there, face down, with a gunshot hole in the back of her head. And the interesting thing is, she's not wearing her shoes, and she's wearing white socks, which are not dirty on the bottom. And this is a muddy, muddy place where she is. And it would be extremely doubtful that she went there of her own free will.
We were just so eaten up with anger, just so mad that this man allowed her family, her friends, to spend this time looking for her, hoping to find her. For you to know all along that you had shot her and left her at the bottoms with ants and mud.
The fact that he knew that whole time and was lying to us the whole time is so painful. It's so painful.
Thomas, in trying to explain what had happened to Micah and how she ended up shot, came up with this story of they went here frequently to fire guns. And according to Thomas, they would go target shooting out there. And that somehow there was a mistake and he accidentally shot her in the back of the head. Something about her gun misfiring or her getting in the way of him when he's shooting. It just didn't make a lot of sense.
I have lots of doubts about his story of the series of events. We spent a lot of time at a Christian youth camp at Camp Dakota, and one of the things we do at Camp Dakota is target shoot. We would have 3 or 4 rifles shooting at the target at the same time, and she would be aware of the safety issues of making sure the rifles are put away when you go check to the target, that before you shoot, there's nobody between you and the target. She would have had to gone through gun safety to get her carry permit that she had, and so she was well aware of the safety issues involved with guns and to not be in front of someone with a loaded gun.
He raised her to know about a gun. Good old Arkansas way. You learn how to fire a weapon. You learn how to take care of it. You learn what to do with it, to clean it, load it, fire it, and everything else.
There's no accident when you shoot somebody in the back of the head, one shot with her own gun, and you don't call anybody, you don't call 911. That wasn't an accident.
Early on, he was offered a plea deal of second-degree murder and 15 years, and we asked our friends to pray that he would take that, and he did not.
It was a disappointment to us that he did not take the plea on the front end. He could have saved us all those months of grief. We wanted to grieve the loss of our daughter. We wanted to get used to this new normal of having a daughter that was no longer with us. Instead, we had to concentrate on all the stuff that was going on in Memphis and make trips over there that were very emotionally laden. For all those months, we just felt like we were just dangling on somebody else's string.
Seeing the crime scene photos and going through the autopsy with the medical examiner, it seemed evident his explanation of what happened that evening did not fit with the facts very well. Thomas is like over 6 feet. I want to say 6'4". She's maybe 5'4", 5'5". The gunshot wound is in the middle of her back, the back of her head. It goes through her ball cap. And it's not quite a contact wound, but it is close. And Thomas was very experienced in firing weapons, and Micah had grown up with guns. I can't see that she would ever be in front of the gun, in front of Thomas with a gun.
We were ready for jury selection. We were ready to go over and be there for this week-long trial.
At the last moment, he made the Alford plea.
The Alford plea says, I'm not confessing to doing this, but the evidence against me is overwhelming, and so therefore I wave the white flag.
The judge clapped his gavel on the desk and said, "You are guilty of second-degree murder." There was some comfort in that.
When Thomas is told by the judge, "You're guilty of second-degree murder," and he walks through the door to go to prison, there was part of me that felt some relief. That this is over. And so I say that is God's way of saying, here's the best blend of justice and mercy. We get to feel some justice, that there's a consequence being paid for what happened to Micah.
So he was convicted for 25 years with no appeals.
And seeing some justice gives me the chance to offer a little bit better forgiveness, because that's what Jesus has asked me to do as well, is to give forgiveness. So I forgive Thomas.
Micah has an amazing family. They're the strongest people I've ever met. And as a mom, I don't know that I could have done what they did. That was her only daughter. They forgave him. Just don't know how you do that.
I believe that she caught him in his adulterous exploits, and as she realized what was going on, in my mind, I believe that was the turning point that led to her death.
Sadly, I think Thomas had a volatile nature. He may have felt like he would have to get rid of her to keep his little world going, sort of like a good church member that can't divorce his wife, so he has to kill her. I think she got out of the car or whatever and was mad, maybe, perhaps ready to run back home in the rain, and he just shot her. And then he got rid of her body in the best place he could. And I think for some reason, he carried her out there and took her shoes off. And I think that was to throw off being at the muddy bank of the Loosahatchee. Well, look there, her tennis shoes are clean.
I miss my sister so much. And she was a light, and she is just an incredible example of what love looks like. And if I could talk to her now, and in a way talk to other people that are in struggling relationships, I pray that if you're in a struggling relationship, don't keep it to yourself. Talk to someone about it.
There was one entry in her prayer journal, and she had a whole paragraph that spoke to Thomas's indiscretions and unfaithfulness. And she said, I can't believe I gave my family up for this. She didn't give us up. But in her eyes, it was him or us, and that makes me so sad. And she used to, as a little girl, when she would get upset about something, and even as an adult, or, when she'd get upset, her eyes would just be wide open, and she had little freckles on her nose. And when I read that in her journal, I can just see that. I can see that sweet little girl with her eyes wide open like, oh my goodness, now I get it. Now I get it. And that was hard as a mom to read, because she could have come to us. We could have prevented this. This did not have to end this way.
Even though the marriage was pretty bad, she kept her faithfulness and her love for God, and that lets us live with hope.
All she's doing is a New Year's Day, taking a hike with her dog.
The blood was wet, it was fresh. That was disturbing.
It was a calm place, she thought, and then she was kidnapped.
The way in which this person gets money is by abducting these victims.
He fits the definition of a serial killer by far.
The person of interest in that missing woman case is at this gas station. The van is there. I saw his face.
Is that difficult to do, to take somebody's head off?
All you got to do is keep sewing, sewing, sewing.